What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I am very excited to have my next guest today. Today, we have a conversion optimization expert. As marketers, this is really the name of the game, right? We have to convert strangers into customers. And a lot of times we think too much about the idea of just stacking more and more tactics, spending more and more money. But really, how do we ensure that we create that journey that drives more results for our clients and for our businesses without having to stack more tactics? And that is what my next guest's expertise is all about, conversion optimization. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul Boag. I'm excited to have our conversation with you.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks very much for inviting me. And let's hope I can be helpful.
Oh, I'm sure you will be. And it's going to be a fun conversation and packed with a lot of insights and a lot of values. So for those who do not know you, let's start with your humble or not so humble bragging rights. What have you done for clients? What have you done for your own business? In other words, what really should make people tune into this episode?
Oh, that's a harsh question to start with. I've been working in the industry for over 30 years with hundreds and hundreds of clients across every conceivable sector at pretty much every size. So clients range from the likes of Puma or Shell or, big commercial clients through to government bodies like the Egyptian government for some bizarre reason, and the Icelandic government, equally strange, through to higher education institutions, to you name it, I've probably worked in it. In terms of conversion improvements, I mean, the one story that always jumps to mind is that I successfully got people that were in their 80s buying ready meals online, which they were not a big fan of, and we managed to increase the conversion rate of the company we were working there by 100-fold, which was a ridiculous increase in conversion that I've never repeated since, and so is a complete outlier. But it sounds good, doesn't it, when you say you've increased conversion by 100-fold?
Yeah, it does sound pretty good, actually, and it's very interesting the types of companies you've worked for. I didn't even know 80-year-olds browse the internet, so the fact that you're able to get them to actually hit the buy button is very, very impressive. So, how did you get into this world? I want to dive. We'll dive into a little bit more of the tactical aspect of conversion optimization, but let's talk about the journey. So, in other words, let's humble you a little bit, because it didn't, like you said, it didn't start there. Let's take it a little bit back and let's walk through kind of what did your journey look like.
Well, when I started, the internet didn't exist. So, well, it did, but it was in very early days. And I started my career with an internship with IBM, working on their first multimedia PCs, the first ones with sound cards and CD-ROMs and exciting things like that. And I found myself designing icons at the very beginning and got given all the shit jobs, as you do when you're starting out in your career. And one of those shit jobs was working on the internet, because it was boring back then, with grey background, no layout, and very little you could do with it. And from IBM, we did more and more stuff on the web. And then from there, I went to a .com startup in the old .com boom and bust days, and went through that roller coaster of a journey. And then from there into running an agency. And it was in those agency years that I really started to embrace the idea of the user experience, because so many websites, so many apps were appalling in terms of their usability and their ease of use. And I could see how damaging that was. Everybody was treating the web like a brochure rather than, like the interactive environment that it was. And so that's when I started to move into user experience design, and kind of grew from there, really, and ended up writing books on the subject and speaking around the world on it, etc. But it all comes down to I cannot look away from the train wreck that is so often the internet and the terrible user experiences that exist on it.
So walk me through a little bit of like that tipping point then, because obviously, okay, you were working in this agency, and now you were, oh, I guess you took on the initiative of taking on this user experience, kind of conversion design, all of that stuff. But why? Like, what was the? Do you remember? Was it a specific thing that occurred, and you're like, okay, what happened?
So we won a big client, which was an organisation in the UK called the National Trust, which are basically responsible for all those old homes and kind of ancient ruins and stuff around the UK. And so I was working with them, and they said, "Oh, can you make the website accessible?" And I was like, "Yes, of course we can," because they were a new client and I would have told them anything they wanted to hear at that stage in my career. And then I went away and panicked and went, "I don't know how to make things accessible." And I bought a book that I thought was about accessibility, and it turned out to be a book called Designing with Web Standards by a guy called Jeffrey Zeldman. And it was about this new way of building websites with CSS and HTML. And it had talked a lot about usability and user experience and those kinds of things. And then I went to see him speak at a conference in the UK. I was a total fanboy. And I came out of that conference going, I want to be like him when I grow up. And so I started blogging at that point and sharing what I knew and the things that I was learning, and discovered that that was really hard work. And I wasn't very enthusiastic about that. Ironically, now I'm 16 years in and blog pretty much weekly. But at the time, that seemed too much. So I started podcasting. Just as podcasts became a thing on the first iPod, and it just took off from there because there was nothing like it. There was nobody talking.
Don't date yourself too much there, Paul. The first iPod. Oh man.
No, I dated myself when I talked about working on the first computer with a CD-ROM and hard drive. I think that's that. And anybody, I don't know whether, does this go out as audio or is it video? Because if it's audio, I'll pretend to be young. Both. Well, anybody who's watching the video can see that I'm not a spring chicken. So anyway, yeah, I started podcasting, and that just took off massively. And that was the tipping point, really. So it was that little journey around falling in love with Jeffrey Zeldman and his kind of insights into the web that sparked my imagination and set me down this road of sharing what I knew and embracing that user-centric approach to the web.
Interesting. It's always funny how we have these moments and these events, and it kind of takes you down this rabbit hole and changes the course of your direction. I mean, for me, it was back in 2012 or so, and I read a book, or no, I watched a training from a guy named Russell Brunson, and he talked about this concept of funnels and marketing funnels, and that's when everything kind of changed for me, because it went down this rabbit hole of, it sparked something in my head of like, oh, this is how this works. So I always love learning those tipping point stories. So now that you kind of went down this conversion path and you started realizing this, what did you kind of learn about conversions? Like, what's your approach to conversions? How do you think about it, and why is it so important?
So it's interesting because of my background. You talking about that moment where you were introduced to funnels. For me, it was very similar in a kind of roundabout way, but I came to it via the user experience angle, right? So I wanted to improve the user experience and make it more pleasurable, make it more engaging, make it more enjoyable. And one of the tools that we have as user experience professionals is customer journey mapping, right? And then I kind of discovered this idea of a sales funnel, right? And it was like, well, those are very closely related to one another. And they almost map one to another pretty closely. And now a lot of marketing people use customer journey mapping, and, so it's become a much more of an overlap. But at that moment, it was this realization, hang on, I can improve the number of people that can transition down that sales funnel or through that sales funnel by fixing friction points in the user experience. So while everybody else was focused on what I call deceptive design patterns, we create this fear of missing out. We manipulate people's psychology to get them to buy. We do all these short-term discounts and you must act now and all of that kind of stuff. I had this realization that actually you didn't need any of that stuff. All you needed to do is create an experience that actually met people where they were and nudged them forward in their journey through removing friction points, through facilitating where they were in the journey, the questions they had, the challenges they were facing, and that kind of stuff. So it was a much more user-orientated approach to conversion optimization than you typically see elsewhere.
Okay. And when you went through this kind of user, because obviously I'm in the software space. So when I think of user experience, I think of it from a standpoint of, what exactly are we trying to allow people to do, and how can we, like you said, remove as much friction as possible. However, when we think of conversion optimization, it's almost it's sometimes counterintuitive, or it's the other side of the same coin, where I'm actually trying to remove as many options as possible for a user so that we can get them to do the one option we want them to do in order to go down a path. So how do you kind of compare those two in your head? Do you define them the same way? What's the difference between conversion optimization versus user experience?
Well, I would say they are the same. I think the problem is that I think the traditional way people have looked at conversion optimization is from our business perspective rather than from the user perspective. So my two sides of the coin is the business and the user. And from the business, we've got certain objectives that we want users to complete. That's fine. That's great, right? But user experience isn't just about giving people a lot of choice, because people are paralyzed by choice. Choice is the enemy of both the user experience and conversion optimization. They're not mutually exclusive. So in my mind, it's about helping the user get to the best solution for them, the best solution you can offer for them. You've got to help them get to that point. And that means a lot of the time clearing out the other stuff. So let's take something as simple as calls to action, right? Often with landing pages, we immediately hit people with this huge amount of information, huge amount of different calls to action. Follow us on social media, sign up to our newsletter, download a demo, buy a product, one after another. And we overwhelm people. And we send their cognitive load through the ceiling, and they feel overwhelmed. That makes them feel distrustful of the experience. They feel negative about the experience and they abandon. So a lot of the job of a conversion rate optimization expert, and indeed a user experience expert, is to strip everything back to its bare minimum, to remove the distractions, the secondary calls to action, and focus people in on what it is that they want to achieve, which is to find a solution to whatever their pain point or their problem is. So, okay, sometimes I will have a secondary call to action. So if you're not going to buy this thing today, maybe you're not ready, then, follow us on social or sign up to a newsletter. But you've got to have a very specific journey and be asking the right questions and offering the right calls to action at the right point for where the user is in that journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually it wasn't actually a test. It was a complete mistake. In the when I first started our software, we had a single landing page where people could sign up to our mapping tool and create your free account. There was no navigation in the top. There were no sub pages, and then the deeper and deeper I got into the SaaS world, the more I started seeing examples of websites where on the top you see product features and you see industry and you see all these particular things, and of course we started to, just because you think that, oh, well, somebody must know something we don't, or these big companies are doing all these things. So we started developing our website to do that. And we made a lot of changes, so we didn't really pay attention to the difference in conversions. But I made a change to my website. The team ended up making a change, except by mistake, one of our plugins broke the navigation. So people weren't able to click on different pages. All they could do is scroll and click get started, or go all the way to the footer and see some extra pages. And what was interesting is it completely changed. Like our conversions doubled instantly, like overnight. The next day, the number of signups, the number of free trials, everything just doubled, because we removed the complexity of like, oh, let me navigate and look at all these particular pages, for example. But contradictory to that, some people would say, well, from a business and conversion optimization standpoint, removing that navigation was beneficial. From a user experience standpoint, it wasn't, because we weren't able to give them all of the information that they may have wanted, traditionally.
Yeah, it depends on where someone is in their journey when they hit that page. And this is why the journey, the funnel, is so incredibly important. Because if someone is hitting that landing page and they're quite late in their journey, or the purchase is not a particularly large one to them, right? Then the challenge, and it also depends on the audience, but let's focus on the journey for a minute. If they're at that point in the journey, they don't need a lot of additional information, right? They know all that they want to. Enough information is on that page. Let's just get it done. If they're at the discovery phase, so if they're early in their journey, and maybe if it's a bigger purchase to them and there are lots of options of it, out in the marketplace that they want to compare, then they're going to want more information. So it's never an either or. It's always about seeing where someone is in the journey, and the kind of product it is, and the level of commitment that product is, and that will dictate how you do things. And that's the problem. Where people so often go wrong is they look at somebody else. They look at, say, Amazon, and go, well, Amazon do it that way, therefore it must be right. Well, yeah, it's right for Amazon. It's right in their circumstances, but it doesn't mean it's right in yours. And because audience is another aspect of this, that there is, well, let's take that elderly audience that I was talking about. That elderly audience are very, very hesitant. They lack confidence on the internet. They lack confidence. They feel like they're going to be scammed, all of that kind of stuff. So if you just drop them on a landing page with the bare minimum information, there's no way they would convert. Right? They want to drill into everything. They want to look at everything. They want to understand everything. They've got more time than anything else, so they can do that. While if you're talking about a 27-year-old in their first job under a lot of pressure, they want to get in and get it done. Right? So there are so many different factors that are at play here that there is never a one size fits all. You can never say, oh, your landing pages should never have main navigation on, right? And that's why we do so much testing in conversion rate optimization and indeed in user experience design, because you don't know until you try,
Yeah, I think a lot of times people forget that what you just mentioned is the thought process around where is somebody in their journey. So I'll give you an example. When I look at Funnelytics, or even one of the CRMs that's really growing right now, Go High Level as an example, they also don't have navigation. However, here's what's interesting. Most of the traffic that's coming to Funnelytics is organic, and it's people who already are aware of the Funnelytics brand. So for them, it's actually more friction, because now Well, I already heard about Funnelytics from somebody. I already heard about this. So I just want to get in and get started. Actually, you giving me more things to look at is creating confusion. And similarly, if you look at high level, 90% of their, I don't know if it's actually 90%, but a lot of their actual traffic and a lot of the people coming to their site are from affiliates, from people who are promoting and talking about this tool. So now when you come to the website, it's like, well, I'm already sold in my head, right? I've already read stuff. I've already done things. Somebody's told me. So I think that that's a very, very clear distinction and clear point. So let's summarize with this. What is your best growth tactic that you can offer somebody, or based on all of the clients you've worked with in general? Like, what is that thing that you've noticed that, man, if every company did this?
Oh, that's a good one. I think I've mentioned it just in passing a minute ago, which is this idea of cognitive load, right? That cognitive load is the amount that we're processing, right? And the amount that's going on in our brains at any one time when we're looking at your offering, your website, your landing page, whatever it be, right? That's like a bucket that fills up. Okay. And it can be 80% full before they even hit your website with the stress of daily life and the things that they're going on. And every little interaction on your website, every point of friction, every element, every interaction, every form field, everything begins to fill that bucket a little bit more. And when they hit the top of the bucket and it starts overflowing, they abandon. So our primary job is really to make that experience as clean and frictionless as possible. Now, we need to understand our users to know how full their bucket is before they hit us. But then we need to start removing elements. The biggest thing that I do, right, and it's going to sound so ridiculously simple, but if you've got a landing page and you want me to optimize it, one of the first things I do is I go through every element on that landing page, every button, every link, every piece of text, and I ask 3 questions. Can I remove this? If I remove this from the page, right, would it impact conversion? If the answer is no, it wouldn't, get rid of it, right? It's just noise. If I can't remove it, can I hide it? Could I put it on a sub page? Could I put it under an accordion or a tab? Because it's secondary content, right? In which case, do it. Get it out of people's line of sight. And the third question is, if I can't do either of those 2 things, can I visually shrink it? Those terms and conditions that you have to have on for legal reasons, but nobody gives a monkey's arse about, right? Make them as small as possible and as invisible as possible, right? So that people are focused on the key actions. And just those 3 steps, doing those 3 things makes a world of difference because it brings people's cognitive load down. And when people's cognitive load comes down, they feel happier, they feel more relaxed, they feel more trusting, then feel more inclined to buy and to act.
Wow. That right there is a very, very powerful tactic and a very actionable one. Can I remove it? Can I hide it? Can I shrink it? Is basically the 3 questions you've got to ask yourself. That's a perfect way to kind of summarize this, is how do we remove people's cognitive loads? And that ultimately is user experience. It is conversion optimization. Paul, this has been a fascinating conversation. Very, very, you did deliver on what you promised at the very beginning, which is give a lot of value to people. Where can people learn more about you?
I'm sorry, I didn't promise that. You promised that. I'm sorry to correct you.
That's true. That's true. Hey, you delivered on my promise.
The best thing I would recommend people check out my website at boagworld.com, BOAG world.com. Actually, I do have a free email course on landing pages. I'll set up a little link for, if you go to boagworld.com/funnel vision, right? That'll take you through to it because it's a long and complicated URL. And that's a 16-part email course that you can have for free about landing pages and all this kind of stuff. So that might help people.
Oh, nice. Amazing. That is a great resource. Thank you. We'll put that link as well in the show notes. And Thank you very much for your time and for your insights.
No problem. Absolute pleasure.